Hey, what's going on everyone? Mecha here, and welcome back to another Fire Emblem character guide. We're continuing our journey through FE4, Genealogy of the Holy War, and this time I'm going to tell you all about the Gen 2 characters. So, Gen 2 has a lot of different characters, and it's a very weird thing to tier. First of all, because of pairings, kids can be very different depending on which parent you give to them. And although some of them don't make a very big difference in how a kid is useful, for a few of them it does, but I decided to throw them all in one list anyway. Speaking of the word list, of course this is not a tier list. It looks like one, but it really isn't. It's more about telling you who is easier to use and who makes Fire Emblem 4 less tedious, because like I said for the Gen 1 character guide, a big problem that people have with Genealogy sometimes, the reason why they drop it halfway through or even before that, is because it just takes so long to complete. So I'm going to repeat some recommendations here. First of all, you can field everyone because there's no deployment limit or anything. Everyone can exit the castle and participate, but moving like 20 units every single turn is going to really drag everything down. So I recommend you pick a couple characters, like maybe 10 to 12, whatever you feel comfortable with, and don't feel bad about leaving the rest of the home castle. They might even come in handy as backup sometimes, but you don't have to use everyone. It might be fun to try everyone, and you definitely should, because as always, everyone in this whole thing is viable to some extent. Everyone can have their purpose on the battlefield, as little as it can be. Some of them will take more effort than others, but in the end, all of them can be used. None of these people is not viable. Fire Emblem 4 especially is easy enough to where you can just go nuts and try whatever you want. That's kind of the whole point of the game, honestly, especially when it comes to pairings. I will not go too deep into pairings themselves because I think experimenting is fun, and I think it's better for another video, but I'll mention a couple good pairings when they come up, alright? I've also included the substitutes in case you got any of those, because I feel like if some people play FE4 for the first time, they might mess up a couple pairings, maybe accidentally get someone killed, and for that reason, like, subs are worth talking about for a little bit. A lot of them are just kind of, I feel like, boring versions of the kids that you could have had, but some of them are actually interesting and fun to use. So I'll go over like the names of the tiers a little bit. Categories, of course, they're categories. They're not ordered within the category, of course. Being on the left doesn't mean anything, being on the right doesn't mean anything. So, no-brainers characters I think you should always use. You don't have to, of course, but they will make this game significantly easier. They'll destroy everything in sight or have some very good utility. I once again tried to do the good investment, no investment thing. It doesn't really work very well for FE4. I don't think I did it for Gen 1 character guide. I tried doing it again and again here. These three are units that I would definitely recommend investing in. They're growth units, especially Seliph. Super fun outcome when you do. For low investment, it's kind of weird. Some of these are units that are just like really good at base, and some of these are units that require like a little investment to be good, and some of them are good regardless of how much investment you put into them. So I'd recommend giving these a shot, and if you feel like they're not really doing much for you, just feel free to drop them. But you can also use them for the whole game, and you won't really feel bad about it. Alright, are units that I don't hardly recommend, but that will still work better than the units that I got in Fun on Foot or High Effort, so I felt like they were worth a bit of distinction about what's down there. Utility are units that you generally wouldn't really use for combat, or you wouldn't use them for combat very much, but they provide some useful utility. Generally we're talking about stabs, and we're talking about thief utility here. Those are very useful, but I'm putting them in a distinct category because I think it's different from what the other units contribute, which is like mostly combat. So that's what utility is for. Fun on Foot are units that are good at combat, have something going on that makes them really fun to use and stuff, but they're on foot, so Genealogy is really about horses and moving very far every single turn. Foot units fall behind very, very quickly, so a unit like this, you'll have to drag them out there to really have them keep up, or maybe give them the leg ring if you really wanted to keep up. I generally recommend leg ring on either your dancer or your lord, but if you really like one of these and you want to give them the leg ring, then go nuts, because they'll act like a mount unit kind of, but with good combat. High effort are units that either, well, they're all foot units, so that should tell you one thing. And also their combat isn't as standout as units that are in the Fun on Foot category, so that's why they're in the high effort. But again, you can use them if you want, and it will work just fine. With a little bit of favoritism, they're still fun to use to some extent. Some of these I actually find not fun to use, but which is why I can't hardly recommend them. But yeah, don't recommend them as much. Let's just put it that way. So, as usual, we'll take it from the top. Seliph is right here on top in No Brainer. Not that it means anything, again, but I do recommend everyone trains up Seliph. The most well-known meta strategy for Seliph is have him inherit a bunch of really good rings, particularly Paragon Ring and Leg Ring are important, and then some really good sword. Most people do the Silver Sword that Sigurd gets in Chapter 1, because, or in the prologue, because, I mean, that's his sword, right? I actually usually recommend a Hero Sword or a Light Sword. Whatever it has, I hope it gets a lot of kills on it. This is usually when people discover how the crit mechanic works, I think. Or at least that weapon, the silver sword, is usually what it does, because it just kills so many things. Once you get 50 kills on something, the weapon can, you know, has an 8 critical, so you can crit with it. That's really helpful on Seliph sometimes when he's like 2 shots. I find that generally if he has the power ring, he's going to 2-shot enemies anyway in Chapter 6. That makes it really easy to raise. And what I usually do is I just cruise through all of Chapter 6 with him and have him reach level 20 by the end of it. Plus some arena in Chapter 7. And he has promoted Seliph, he gets a horse, and he's just good to go from there. Because without a horse, again, the game gets a lot more tedious. And unlike Sigurd, Seliph doesn't start with a horse. So you want to get one at level 20 by promoting him as early as possible. It's not terrible if he doesn't have it by Chapter 7. He has to walk through a desert anyway, so the horse doesn't come in handy right away, but you want to work towards it ASAP. So part of the reason why Seliph is like so good is because you have all that investment into him, but it is by far the best strategy you can possibly do. Feel free to deviate, as always. This is just recommendations, but I found that FE4 is a lot more fun to play when my lord gets there in like 3 turns instead of like 5 or 6, especially if you're using a large team. You have to drag everyone over there with him. So that's Seliph. Sylvia, or actually this is Lean, this is Sylvia's daughter, and then we got the substitute Layla. 2 dancers, you only get 1 of course. If you pair Sylvia, you get Lean, and if you don't, then you get Layla. I like Lean because she can inherit things, so something like the Night Ring, for example, you can pass it down. If you want to buy that with Layla, it's quite expensive. But either way, they will do what dancers do in FE4, which is dance for 4 people at the same time, and that is ridiculously broken. Pretty good candidate for the leg ring. I often recommend Seliph, but the dancer works as well. Dance for 4 people is nice. A lot of the people in this game have Canto. They can just move after attacking, get into position in a diamond shape, and you just dance for all 4 of them, and you can move them again. And that means that from killing 4 units, or like killing 4 enemies at that turn, you can kill 8. That's pretty ridiculous. Or you can, you know, heal someone, warp someone, steal an extra time with Patty or Daisy, that kind of stuff. It's dead useful, no brainer, no investments, just really good. Dancers, I think, are fairly easy to keep out of combat at FE4, as long as they're like not right in front of everything, because all the enemies tend to move in packs, so it's pretty easy to see where they can go safely and where not. So all the more reason to get used to using dancers. Next is Oifi, the Jagan that's so good that they named the whole archetype after them. And then I feel like that was mostly people who haven't played this game, because I think Oifi works a little bit differently, but I don't want to get into that all that much. Oifi is like, there's 2 kinds of people that judge Oifi. One of those people that I think is like Seth and Titania, where he just destroys everything, and other people think that he's like worse than all the kids. I'm a little bit different. I think Oifi is really powerful, but I find his dynamic a little bit different from Seth and Titania, because I do think Seliph surpasses Oifi by Chapter 7 if you give him that favoritism and everything that I talked about. And I don't think he's as good as, well, I think he's on par with Ares in some ways. That kind of depends on what you need out of him. But I do think his skill set and his stats are very good. He's particularly bulky. He has like, what is it, like 16, 17, 18 base defense or something, and 40 HP. His XP gain is very slow because it starts at level 15, which is kind of to simulate the whole pre-promote thing. This is actually, come to think of it, this is probably the first game where you actually don't have set XP gain. Actually, no, FE2 has that well. But FE5, I think, is when promoted units actually start gaining less XP than unpromoted units. But in this game, Oifi just starts at a higher level, so it's basically the same thing. So he quote-unquote steals XP. It's actually kind of funny if you try to use Oifi like you use Marcus in FE6, try to set up enemies to get kills. Like, get enemies to low HP so that other units can kill them to gain XP. Because Oifi has a critical skill by himself, so he can unexpectedly just crit an enemy and kill them. But that doesn't make him any worse, I believe. It's just funny. But yeah, he is pursuit and critical. He is very fast, he has horse, he has swords, he has lances, he has everything you need. He's a really good unit, there's no reason not to use him. And I think units like him, we call them static units sometimes because they will be there regardless of your pairings. I think these are thrown into the game in case you mess up your pairing and you don't want to have like a bad time. So that's why we've got people like Oifi and Ares and Shannon and Julia. They are here to make sure that even if you mess up your pairings, you still have really good units to work with. So better make use of it, even if you did make good pairings. Ares is kind of like in the same boat. He has the Mistletoe, which is a ridiculously good holy weapon you just get for free. Like, I remember the first time Ares came down to join me, I was like, oh, shit. Oh, you actually giving me this for free? Like, are you for real? It's a 30 might sword, and it has like plus 10 strength on it. It's stupid. He kills everything. He has pursuit as well, and the sword gives him critical. And then I think he also has adept, and he also has vantage, because why not? So yeah, super broken. He also is pretty good against mages because he gets plus 10 rest from his sword as well, I believe, if not plus 20. I forgot how much it is, but it is a lot. And because of that, he can fight enemy mages, which is helpful because the time he joins, you actually start seeing more and more mages. And it's good to have someone who can fend them off. He doesn't have very good 2-range, because the Mistletoe doesn't have that. You have to resort to like a javelin or something. Olaf is actually very good with magic swords, I forgot to mention that. You can buy a fire sword in chapter 7, or you can have him buy a sword from someone else, like a wind sword, thunder sword, light brand, whatever. And he's pretty good with those because his base magic is very high, so if you give him magic, we can actually 2-shot some enemies with a magical attack. Ares doesn't really do that very well, so just use him as a 1-range beatdown rather than someone who can actually 1-2 range enemies. There's not too many spots in FE4 where you want 1-2 range, but when they do become common, they become very common. It is something that characters have a bit of trouble with, because javelins and hanaxes in this game are very bad. There's like 1 or 2 characters that have really good 1-2 range, besides like the unit that has like a light sword with a bunch of crit on it. So 1-2 range is very valuable, but he doesn't really have it. That's still okay though. Still has a horse, still has swords, still has the Mistletoe, still has pursuit. Still too good not to put in no-brainer. And we have good investment. Dermot is like kind of like a vanilla growth unit version of the paladins that I just mentioned. Like obviously he's much worse in a lot of ways, but I think he's still worth investing in. It's like a better version of Beowulf, like a version that joins earlier with probably a better skill set depending on the pairings you made. He's probably Beowulf's son if you follow most guides, because the Beowulf Lachesis pairing is very, very good. So just make sure he has pursuit. Alternatively, he might have paired Lachesis with like Medea or something, or Alec, but generally Beowulf is to go to because they can pass down swords and everything. And he's going to have very good strength, partially thanks to Lachesis' Hazel blood, so his growth will be pretty good. I found that his combat at base is actually pretty lackluster. Like his durability and avoid are just kind of, they feel below average, like it just kind of dies more quickly than you'd expect. But once he promotes, he's just super solid. He gains adept no matter what you do upon promotion, because he goes from Free Knight to Force Knight, I think it's called now. And it also has like a huge bonus to his speed and skill along with it. So he's going to have like really huge adept rates, and he'll just crush everything in no time. The weight promotion is a little bit rough. He also has Charm, which is very helpful. You can just put him next to someone or nearby in support range. Give him +10 hit and avoid. Very helpful. You can stack up with Selith's 3-star leadership and turns people into just avoid tags. It's very, very helpful. So don't forget about that either. Yeah, would definitely recommend investing into him. Not obligatory, like you can get by without him because you have all these broken units. But I always find it fun to have someone to invest into. Fee is a flyer. I haven't been super happy with the flyers in this game because of the road tiles that they cannot make use of. Like it's almost just like it's better to just have terrain to take advantage of. And it also like reduces her ability to take advantage of forest and stuff to boost her avoid when you need to. She can get to some villages to save them, and that can be very nice. There's a shield ring village in chapter 7 and a couple of villages in chapter 8 where it's easy to get her to. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of flyer utility in this game, but the little that there is makes me appreciate Fee and being around, and her stats are all around good. I particularly like the Pegasus Knight class in this game because it has access to B-rank swords and lances, so she can use both the Brave Sword and the Brave Lance to just quadruple enemies. Depending on her dash, it can be very different, either physically or magically oriented. If you pair Aranus with Claude, for example, then you'll have a Fee that's probably better off using magic swords like the Wind Sword or the Light Sword. But if you have someone like, let's say, what are good pairings? Noish, for example, is a very interesting pairing for Aranus. Then she'll have like Pursuit from her like base class, like from Aranus, as well as a cost and critical. And she'll have like much higher strength. So you kind of want to like tune Fee based on that. But you'll be able to figure that out. Like if you know how to make the pairing for Aranus, you probably know how to set her up to be good. But yeah, Pegasus Knight is a pretty fairly alright class, and combat-wise she should do fine. The big problem is just keeping up with movement, but there's always something for her to do, so that's why she's in good investment. She also gets staff after promotion, so she can use like the return staff or heal someone, stuff like that. Pretty cool. Leaf is like the ultimate investment unit. If you got to Gen 2, you probably know how that goes, because he has the same promotion as Lachesis, so that's a lot of fun. Of course, it does take, I think, 18 levels to get them there, and it can be pretty tricky to get promotion, but the sooner you do it, the better. I usually manage to do it by chapter 8 at the very last, but I don't blame anyone for getting there by chapter 9, because that's when I got it on my first playthrough. And once you get it, you'll see that it's absolutely worth it, and he has all kinds of utility going on. Until then, I do recommend passing down like the Pursuit Ring to him, if you like, or at least some expensive items so you can buy the Paragon Ring, get to promotion quickly. And that will make him very, very useful, very, very fast. I don't really want to say a whole lot more about Leaf and his utility, not to spoil his super class upon promotion, but if you know Lachesis, you probably know what I'm talking about, and you know just how good it is. And that's why he's like a really good investment unit. Probably the most recommended unit in good investment out of this whole thing. Next we got low investments. These are units that I don't necessarily recommend using for the whole game, although for some of them I would recommend doing so, but it feels like they're not as much investment units, and yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now with these. Some of them are foot units even, which is interesting considering how good mans are, so let's go over them. Shinan is one of those foot units. He joins with, well, doesn't join with it, but he gets a Balmung from a talk convo with Paddy on like the turn he joins, and then he just gets plus 20 speed and plus 10 skill, and you get to stack that with Pursuit, Astra, Adept, and it's ridiculously high avoid, and you have a big winner. He's a pretty good no-brainer killer. Again, no one-to range like Shinan because he really wants to use the Balmung. Some people say he relies on the Balmung to survive and do things, but I mean, no one else can use the Balmung unless you glitch the game. And even if he could, he's still the only one who has it until chapter 9 or so. So yeah, relying on the Balmung is not bad. He has enough money to repair it whenever he needs to. You can spam the Balmung all game long, and he will never break. It's 30 might, and it just destroys everything. So, unless you're fighting some other holy weapon users, like he's not notably good against something like the Thor Hammer, which you will encounter quite a lot over the course of the game, because it kind of negates his high avoid, and you can get one-shot by it because his HP is kind of on the low side. So, for bosses that have the Thor Hammer or something like that, you're probably better off using someone like Ares, or Seliph even, or like a hero sword on someone else. But other than that, against generics, Shannon is basically invincible. A lot of enemies will just not attack him because his avoid is too high. His joining situation is a bit weird, where I feel like no matter what you do, there's some kind of chance that he'll just die, because the enemies have like 16 hit on him, and he gets 2 KO'd by the Dark Mages there, because Jormungandr is ridiculously accurate to the point where even Balmung doesn't make it not accurate. So if they ever remake FE4, I hope they change it a bit, just make him invincible. Like, come on, he's supposed to be. Although it would kind of take the tension away. But Balmung good. The reason he's not in like no-brainer is because foot units are kind of annoying to use, and I find that usually in later chapters, especially once your units get more competent, especially once Seliph is promoted and you have a promoted Ares and maybe a promoted Leaf, then having Shannon run behind him without the leg ring is not going to do a whole lot for you, and it just makes everything slower, and he's better off as like a castle guard or someone that just takes care of enemies near the castle, and that can still be good, but it's not as great, so that's why he's not a no-brainer. But obviously, Shinan is a no-brainer when he just joins, so use him for as long as you like, and when you feel like it doesn't add anything anymore, just put him on the bench and use him, whip him out whenever you need him to. Finn is very different, so how good Finn is in Gen 2 kind of depends on what you did with him in Gen 1. If you just benched him or killed him off at the start, then obviously he's going to be base level and kind of bad. But I'm kind of assuming you at least got him to promotion or near it, and then he can be pretty useful in the starting area where Leaf and Nana start out. Help setting up armors for Leaf to kill, or just do enemy phases, because he's probably going to be the most bulky unit in that area. But it really depends. I highly recommend it using Finn in Gen 1, so I'm sort of going to assume he's sort of good. But even if he's a base level you can get by, one trick you can do if you're worried about that part of the game and you want to set up for it in Gen 1 is what I usually do is I give a return band and a return staff to Nana, so that if you want to, you can get the whole squad out to the home castle by returning Leaf and Finn using the return staff, and you return band Nana, and you can get out of there. The area is also pretty good for getting speed on Leaf though, but you can also get it elsewhere, like from the Dark Mages near the starting point in Chapter 7. So it's not a must, and yeah. So you can go either way you like. But for most players, I think what will happen is like at least a promoted Finn or one near promotion, and they'll be able to fend off the enemies that start in that area and have them fight there. From there, Finn is usually benched for a lot of people, I find. I certainly didn't do a whole lot with him in Gen 2 because he felt less good. But given the right equipment, he can still shine. Fee probably doesn't need to Brave Lance all the time, but Finn could definitely use it, and that will let him quadruple most of the slower enemies. Things like Wyverns and Cavaliers are just not that fast, so he can either 2-shot enemies or 4-shot them with a quadruple attack, and that still makes him an offensive powerhouse sometimes. So he's not great against mages defensively, for example, because his avoid is very low since he's being weighed down by lances, but you can still make use of miracles sometimes to get him through. I still think he's more of a powerhouse in Gen 1 than he is in Gen 2. But there's absolutely no reason not to use him, as long as you feel like moving him around on the map every single turn. Having a mount is never going to be bad, and the Brave Lance alone kind of makes him usable, because Brave Lance and Pursuit is just a really good combo. Sometimes you can even javelin enemies to death too, if you have the right Finn with the high enough stats. But that kind of depends on like how much speed he has, because it does weigh him down by I think like 18 points. And as slow as enemies are, they don't always get doubled by someone that's being weighed down by 18, so that's going to depend a little bit. Then there's Nana and Jan, who is their substitute. I put them in the same tier because, I mean, they're just going to heal people, so it doesn't really matter a whole lot what their stats are like. You don't really have to tune Nana's pairing to make her optimal. I generally just focus on making Dermot good, which is why I usually pair Lachesis with Beowulf or someone like him. Nana doesn't really care about magic that much. She just wants the mint people to get him higher up. She won't top them off completely, but that's okay because you don't need the two all the time. And, you know, if you use Ethlin, then you know how useful a multi-healer is, despite low magic. You just heal people, and you run a little bit back to safety to make sure you're out of enemy range, and that's pretty useful. I also usually resign these to return utility, so give them the return staff, and have them return whoever wants to go to the home castle. Maybe to get promoted, and then to be warped back to whatever castle you last conquered. Or maybe you want to go back to the home castle because there's enemies there, or you want to go back to the home castle so you can warp to a different castle. And it's faster than walking that way. And there's all sorts of spots where return staff just comes in handy, and having it on the mounted unit makes it more flexible. Like, basically having return on her and then having a warp user in the home castle from the utility category, it's a nice way to make sure that people can get to castles wherever they want, whenever you want to. And again, it just saves you time moving around on the map, so that's why it's very helpful. Nana obviously better than Jan. Jan doesn't have any skills, whereas Nana will probably at least have Pursuit, and she will have Charm from Lachesis as well, so you can stack those to get more. Layla also has Charm, by the way. I forgot to mention it. I don't think it's very relevant because having her near combat is usually a bad idea. But yeah, you can have triple Charm plus leadership to just give someone like plus 50 avoid if you want to. That is pretty nice. Not a whole lot else that Nana can do. She only gets C-rank staff, so no physic here or restore unless you pair Lachesis with Claude, which I usually don't recommend. But yeah, definitely recommend using these, and you don't have to train them in combat, although you can arena and get gold that way, and that can be pretty helpful. So make sure that you do arena with them. They have B rank in swords at the very least. Nana actually has A rank because of the Hazel blood. So that way you can always use some good sword, get through the arena, get money, and get your promotion for an extra point of move. But that's not as much of a priority as someone like Seliph or Leaf promoting, so don't worry too much about it. Then we have Set and a substitute Hawk. They are also in low investments, but not a no-brainer because even though they can be really good, particularly Set if his dad is Levin, they're still foot units, so I don't rate them super highly, but there's no reason not to give them a spin because they're pre-promotes, so they just don't need any training whatsoever. They'll have at least B rank staffs, and they can have A rank, or Set can have A rank if you have Claude as his dad, and this is the time I actually do recommend having that. Sometimes it's a pretty good pairing, Claude Aranis, to make sure that your Set has A-rank staves. But you can also do something like Noish, and even though it will nerf Set's magic a lot, it doesn't matter because there's so many multi-hit skills. Like, if Noish is his dad, then you have like Pursuits, Critical, Adept, and a cost. So there's always, like, even if you 3-shots an enemy, there's no way he's not gonna like activate another. It's like having Jam Cabot on a magic user. So even though his growth of magic is like 10% or something in that pairing, it doesn't really matter. But alternatively, you can have him like Claude as a dad and have a really high attack power. And he comes with a lightning tone that he uses pretty well, but you can give him anything. Like, I often give him Elwind, so I can give lightning to someone else, but really just do whatever you want. Super easy to use Sage. Even Hawk is pretty good at just without any training. Like, this is one of the few substitutes that's almost like a better version of Set sometimes. I think the Set I usually make are usually better than Hawk, but most pairings, like something like Alec Fury, for example, Alec Aranis, Hawk would still be better than that, for example. So that is something you can do. So if you don't pair Aranis, you don't have to worry too much. Hawk is still like a pretty good Sage. He kind of works the same way as Set. There's not a whole lot to be said about them, besides the fact that, like, yeah, good combat. Once your range is very nice. Pretty good against Dark Mages. It's just these are foot units, so it's not always worth moving around, but at the very least it's useful for like restore utility, physic utility, fortify maybe, depending on what you did with Claude. So definitely recommend using these at the very least when they come in handy. It's just moving them across the map can be kind of tedious. Not a terrible Lecring candidate, that's just, again, I think Seliph and Lean and Lena are way better. Then there's Altena, who I put in good low investments because she joins like 3 levels per promotion, and you can arena her in a joining chapter, get her promoted, and then she's probably pretty good. You don't even have to do anything pairing-wise because she's the daughter of Quan and Ethlin. And she's going to join with Adept and Critical, so pretty good skill set. And she has the Gaybolg, which gives a ridiculous amount of might. It does slow her down quite a bit to the point where she probably won't double all enemies, but there might be some that she can one-hit KO, like mages, so it's still pretty strong. The reason I don't think Altena is as good as these guys is not her availability, because I don't really count availability for these things. It's the fact that she's a flyer, so all the same disadvantages that Fee has to deal with, as well as the bow weakness and the weakness to magic. So she's not as great against the enemy types that she goes up against. Like, something like a generic, like I don't know, a guy with a sword, a lance, or an axe, she's going to be fine against. But a lot of the enemies when she joins are either going to be effective against her, or they're going to hit on her res, or just going to be annoying in some other way. So that makes Altena pretty bad defensively sometimes. But it's kind of weird to say that about a unit that has like 40 to 50 defense, depending on what you do with her. So don't worry too much about it. She can still contribute in your army with almost no investment whatsoever. So definitely try her out for a spin, see what you can do with her. Just don't be too disappointed when you find out like, oh, I actually can't put her anywhere near here because she's going to get killed by this Bow Knight, or she's going to get killed by this Dark Mage, or put to sleep or something. That's the scary part with her. Fee at least has the resistance to not get slept sometimes by enemies, because all you need to do is have more res than they have magic, and you just can't be put to sleep. So the barrier ring can really help her out in that way, and that can be pretty helpful for disposing of like some of the Dark Mages in the epilogue, for example. Altena doesn't really have that luxury, but she can still be contributing in some other ways. You just have to be a little bit more clever about it. But yeah, she's only around for like 3 chapters or so you might as well make use of her, see if she's any good for you. Then I have some units that I think are alright, but I don't recommend them as much. And you see that actually all of them, including Arthur here, or Arthur. I got myself used to saying Arthur for FE8 reasons a lot, and now I have to go back to saying Arthur. All these have mounts in some capacity. He gets them on promotion, all the others just have mounts to begin with. But there's not as much use for them in this gen, so that's why they're low. They're kind of like Alex and Noishes of this gen, I guess. But I still recommend you give him a spin just to see how you like him. Arthur joins as a 5 movement mage, and depending on his pairing, I could shoot him up a bit. My favorite pairing for him is obviously Horse City, where you pair Lewin with Tiltu, and then you get Arthur with the Forseti in Chapter 6, and that's super helpful. Because I said 1-2 range that's good in this game is a little bit rare. The only really good way to get it is like a 50 kill plus light sword on most sword users. But Arthur's like, okay, I have Forseti, I have 1-2 range, I kill everything, and I also get a horse eventually. And once you promote, you have Forseti on a horse, like a Horse Seti. That's super good. If you do more like basic pairing, I guess we'll call it, like Azel Tiltu, then you'll have Pursuit. And you have some like good magic to go with it, and that's pretty nice, but it kind of just turns him into like a better version of Azel, and I don't think Azel is very good. A lot of people wanted him in high effort actually last time, which I could definitely see. I decided to put him a little bit higher, but that can work. There's not a whole lot of other good pairings for him. There's like Lex, which you can do for Lex Tiltu, and then you get Paragon plus Wrath Vantage, which is interesting, but the attack power is a little bit lacking sometimes, so it doesn't always one-shot everything. It's a funny pairing, you should definitely do it once you're alive. I did it for my first ever playthrough, but it really falls short a lot of the time, but it is a lot of fun to use, so I recommend you try it out sometimes. But most recommended pairing is definitely Lewin Tiltu. So that's basically Arthur. Once he hits level 20, he becomes a Mage Knight. He's more like these guys, I guess, so you could see him as like a good investment, but I put him in alright just because if you don't have Forseti, then his combat is just kind of like he one-round stuff, but he's not defensively very good, and his movement is obviously garbage, so you have to deal with that. But if you do promote him, then he becomes pretty good. And Forseti is obviously like super broken. Like once he becomes Forseti on a horse, he's in here, absolutely. So really wild depending on your pairing and what stage of the game we're talking about. This is, in case you don't recognize him, this is Tristan, substitute for Dermot. The big problem with Tristan is that he doesn't have Pursuit, he just has Critical. So even though he has a horse, and even though he has swords, he has no Charm and no Pursuit, and that kind of hampers his combat. He can still functionally work with like a hero sword. His strength is pretty good. He actually has like 100% HP growth, I believe, which is funny. But he doesn't have the Hazel Blood, and overall he's just kind of an inferior version. The hero sword, a lot more people want the hero sword than like other hero weapons. Like Finn, I'm fine with giving the Brave Lance. These guys, I'm fine with giving the Brave Bow. Johan, I'm fine with giving her Brave Axe, but the Hero Sword, you only get 2 of those total, and there's a lot of people who want to use it, so it's kind of hard to justify for Tristan. But if you do have one left over, you can do pretty alright with it, which is why he's in alright tier, and not in like good investments. Then we have the Bow Knights. We have Lester, and a substitute Dimna, the son of Aideen. And he's pretty alright for Bow Knight. He's just Midir, but with better stats. Less useful in Gen 2, I think, than Midir was in Gen 1, because there's not as much need to chip. A lot of people just have good offense in Gen 2 because they inherit all these powerful weapons, and they just destroy about everything they touch. It's still pretty nice to have him, and just one-round a guy with the Brave Bow. Passing on the Brave Bow to him is always a good idea, so definitely pair Lester, or definitely pair Midir with Aideen. Nonetheless, he doesn't take a counter from most enemies, but other than that, there's not a whole lot of reasons to like train him. You won't be disappointed when you try it. It's still like, if you look at this combat, it's just fine. It's just it doesn't kill everything on enemy phase, which is kind of what you hope for at this point in the game. That's why all these units are around. You don't really need chip damage as much in this generation. So that's why it's just an alright. That doesn't mean it's bad, and he can still just one-round just about everything. Dimna, he is kind of cool in the fact that he has Pursuit as a substitute, which is something a lot of them get. and he still has a mount, he still has bows. Obviously, you have to buy his bows for him. Like, being a substitute means you don't get to inherit anything. You just have to start from scratch with money management. That can be kind of annoying. So you have to buy the Brave Bow off of someone else, or like get it from a droppable item in Chapter 8, which means you get it later. So that alone kind of sucks. And he does have an interesting thing with his secret convos. All the substitutes have some secret conversation somewhere that either boosts their stats or something. So in Dina's case, he actually gets +5 strength in Chapter 6, which is a big boost to his base strength. I think he has like 10 base or something. So that's pretty nice. Even with that strength boost, I still don't think he's viable enough to go up further than Lester, but it makes him pretty interesting. And it helps. But his other stats are still a bit lackluster. I think there's a good chance that he gets O-code by Chapter 7 Dark Mages, for example. So he's definitely inferior to Lester. But if you get stuck with him because you didn't pair Aideen somehow, then it could be a lot worse, right? So he's still alright. Femina, also another victim of being a substitute and being a more boring version of, you know, the original, the OG, the child. Femina got stuck without pursuit. She's an adept, which is kind of unfortunate because she already would have gotten adept on her promotion to Falcon Knight, but instead she's stuck with having it unpromoted and just not having pursuit or critical or anything. So if you give her Brave Lance, she could be alright, but the lack of, like, Brave Lance is great on her because, like, with V it works because she has pursuit, so she can quadruple people, and they really need more than 2 hits to kill enemies. So if you don't have pursuit, you just kind of, and then no money or anything to work with, it's just kind of, so I still put it in alright for the little things that Flyers can do and the somewhat salvageability of the Pegasus Knight class and having stats of promotion, but I couldn't put her higher than this. I also didn't want to put her lower because I can't put like a Pegasus Knight in high effort or less, like have fun on foot. That just doesn't work. So that's why she's up in here. Could argue maybe utility, maybe. But yeah, no hearty recommendation for Femina here. Johan, I put him in alright. I actually had a funny combo with Rengar about like how viable he actually is, because I always hated using Johan. I don't think he's like good at all overall, but looking at the numbers, he's not terrible. He's an Axe Knight, and he gets the Brave Axe from like pretty soon after joining, so in a way you could think of him as Lex. He even has Vantage just like Lex, but he doesn't have Paragon and his stats aren't as good comparatively as Lex's are. So if you're expecting Lex, prepare to be disappointed. You kind of have to look at him as his own thing. And there are some good things that he can do. He can two-shot mages, so the Dark Mages in Chapter 7 he can two-shot, Thunder Mages as well. I think if you have like enough attack power, you might be able to two-shot like Wyverns in Chapter 9. So there are some things he can help with, but like if his Brave Axe doesn't cut it against the enemy, he just has no other options whatsoever. And if you don't have a Pursuit Ring for him, that means this is kind of like fucked. So I don't think an Armor Knight is not going to kill. Now you could give him the Pursuit Ring, he's probably going to have the money for it by the time Leaf has promoted, because there's not a whole lot of other characters that want Pursuit, especially if you make your pairings properly. I've never tried Pursuit Ring Johan, I'm interested to see how it would work, but I can't really like recommend him very, very highly. I think he's like on par with or better than Tristan. That's kind of where it ends for me. A little bit more positive on Johan. He does have like a really high base level, so getting promotion is not super difficult. And just with base strength and promotion, he actually is like pretty high. It's like 39 attack at base or something, plus whatever he gets from strength growth. That might be his level 20 average actually, I don't remember, but could be alright. He's on a horse at least, so he's better off than the fun on foot folks at the very least. But I think the fun on foot for units is more fun to use, so we'll get to those soon. And then we have utility. These are characters that I would not use for combat generally. Just have them raise their staffs. They can grind pretty well, or in the Thieves case, they can still grind in the arena. But they're not here for the combat, let me just put it that way. So, Lana and Mana are their names. I get kind of confused because there used to be a translation that called her Rana, so it's like, okay, we got Mana, Lana, and Rana. I'm like, okay, cool. So usually, but pairings for Aideen kind of focus on making Lester good. So that means getting like some kind of strength growth and getting like pursuit and a cost and that kind of stuff with Midir. That means Lana just kind of turns into like a generic healer, just Aideen version 2.0 with no notable skills before promotion, because healers just don't fight. Nuns and warfare don't mix very well. So you just have someone that has like Aideen staffs and just kind of heals people. Alternatively, you compare Aideen with Claude, and it should become very good. She'll have like Physic and Fortify and like all kinds of higher rank staffs, Rescue even if you want it. So that kind of stuff is pretty cool. But it's kind of rare for that to happen in most playthroughs, I think. I think most people just focus on Lester. But it's definitely a viable option if you want to make a good Lana. Getting her really high magic, making her able to promote faster thanks to spamming Fortify and Rescue is also super good. So that's pretty cool. So good staff utility. I just leave her in the home castle, usually have her warp around along with Julia. or instead of Julia, or have Julia standing in for her, like that. She's kind of the same boat, except no inheritance, so she has to buy all those staves by herself, which costs a lot of money. And she can't do arena, so getting money to her is kind of hard. You have to use thieves to do that. Probably the most boring substitute to use in the whole game, because there's literally nothing exciting going on here. No skills, no inheritance, just kind of utility, that's it. Even has to buy the warp staff, unfortunately. Then there's Julia, who I think is interesting as a unit, actually. She can't do combat unpromoted because she's in the Shaman class, the same class as Deirdre, and she promotes to a Sage, so she's much better off in that respect. She gets Resire in Chapter 6, or Aura, but I recommend getting Resire. Just make sure you seize the bottom castle when it's turned red, or when it's still red, and then talk between Julia and Seliph. You get Resire, or Nosferatu. It's actually called Nosferatu now. And that makes her pretty good at combat overall. Kind of slow, but able to tank most enemies and just heal herself back up, which is pretty useful, and works in the arena as well. She has Pursuit and Adept, which is, a very nice basic skill kit. And she can't use any other tomes besides that Nosferatu for a while until she promotes. And when she's a Sage, she can actually use like Lightning if you want to. That's pretty helpful. Definitely recommend using Julia for as much as you can. For combat, it can work in some places, but our 5 move makes it hard to get there sometimes, so at other times it might be good to just leave her in a home castle and have her spam warp to get promoted ASAP, whatever you want. That's why she's in utility. You could put her higher, but I didn't want to put foot unit very high because 5 move is really, really bad, and getting to promotion takes some time, and she doesn't even get a horse on promotions. Like, it's still like 6 move after promotion, but Sage promotion gains are pretty nuts. A lot of speed, a lot of skill, so no reason not to. So yeah, would recommend using her as much as you like, as long as it makes sense within the situation. I recommend using Julia. That's basically what it comes down to. But most of the time, it's just staff spamming. Healing people is good. Don't miss talk conversations involving her. Then there's Patty and Daisy. They're thieves, and just like in Generation 1, I think you should always use the thieves whenever you can, but it can be hard to find a spot where they can steal because the enemies can often like either 2-hit kill or 1-hit kill them. But whenever you get a chance, steal some money and then you can give it to someone who needs it more. Substitutes are all very wanting for money. Leaf sometimes is very wanting for money. The Dancer is very wanting for money to buy like a night ring or a leg ring sometimes, or just giving it to people so they can buy the Paragon ring. There's always people who want money somewhere, and being able to just steal money upon attacking is super, super helpful. So Patty's nice because she can inherit a lot of expensive stuff, sell it, and then give the money to someone else, or use it for herself to buy Paragon and get further in the arena. Promoting a Thief is always fun because they get like a +1 move, and then Pursuit as well. For combat on Patty, I usually recommend Holden as a pairing for Bridget, because that way she gets Luna and she gets higher sword rank, so you can use like B rank swords, get the hero sword before promotion, because otherwise she's stuck at C. If you're stuck at C, then you probably want like a light brand or some other kind of magical ranged sword to steal money without taking a counter. Alternatively, you can have Do Bridget, and that way you will have access to Bargain. And that way it'll be easier to just keep a lot of money around without losing it all to selling to the pawn shop and stuff. So those are my favorite pairings for Bridget, but almost anything works, because Patty generally doesn't really care about her combat too much. She just wants to steal stuff, and Faval is the same almost regardless of what you do. So don't feel bad if you messed up your pairing with Bridget. If you completely botch your pairing, you just don't pair Bridget, then you're stuck with Daisy, who I think statistically is significantly worse than Patty, but all it really matters is that they can steal money from range, so it still kind of works, just more of a pain to train her. She has Miracle, which can be useful to cheese the arena sometimes, the same way you can do with like Finn and other characters that have Miracle, like your Sylvia actually has it, and Lean kind of has it from Inheritance. So Miracle can be nice sometimes. I prefer having actual like customizable skills from Patty, so I definitely recommend pairing Bridget when you can, but Daisy, I mean, still kind of fun, right? They have Corporal and Charlo. It's actually like this, I believe, right? I think. I don't remember. Yeah, this is Charlo. There we go. Yeah, Charlo, Corporal. There we go. There we have it. Cool little boys, but just staff utility, really. Like, actually raising them to be like level 20 promoted and stuff is a lot of work, a lot more utility, a lot more dragging than I would want it to be. So that's why I'm not recommending them as like investment projects. It's doing kind of late for that. Like, when chapter 9 is basically over, they join you. Kind of more like halfway over is when they join you. It's not super great, but spamming stats with them, like if you paired Lewin and Sylvia, you get a Corporal that can potentially at some point get Forseti at level 20, but that's a lot of grinding away. So generally just use them as staff utility. They can be around when Julia is absent for a little bit, so they can substitute for her and do warp utility. So that's pretty nice. Make sure to sell Julia's stuff at the end of chapter 9, by the way. Forgot to mention that. Sell it before the end of chapter 9. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend using these for anything but like staff grinding or staff utility in the home castle, because 5 move is bad. Then we have fun on foot, units that have good combat, or pretty good combat, but they're on foot. So we have Larce and Rodoban, and depending on what you did with your pairings, they will destroy everything and have a lot of cool skills to work with and high stats, but they'll be on foot. So being on foot is kind of tedious, but it is pretty nice to have something like Astra plus Luna, or Paragon and Astra, or what else can they have? They can like 5,000 different multi-hit skills through the no-ish pairing with Ira. But yeah, they're Ira's kids, and they really inherit everything from Ira, including the fact that people love using them, even though they're on foot. And you know, that's cool. I enjoy using that too. But I don't recommend it for like playing through FE4 at some reasonable tempo. But they can really spice up your playthrough if you use them. They're super fun. When you always get Pursuit and Astra upon inheritance, there's nothing you can really go wrong with. Give them like a good sword, like a silver sword or a hero sword, and watch them go nuts. Especially in the arena, they're like deliciously overkill, and it's hilarious. You also have Nihil, which has some interesting uses somewhere in later chapters where enemies start having like good skills. So that's pretty fun. But they're on foot, and being on foot, you know, as fun as it is, it's nice for Lawrence, but everyone else is like, I don't know if I want to deal with that. So yeah, kill everything, but be patient about the movement thing. There's really all there's to say about these guys. I've talked about them a lot. I talked about Ares things in the Gen 1 character guide, so I don't think I have a lot more to say on these two. Super fun to use if you can, you know, move them around. The same goes for like all these units, honestly. Linda is the substitute for Tinny, who is like, surprisingly, the substitute is higher this time because Linda has Paragon and Wrath. And she can also use Thorn at base, which you get basically right when she joins, or like a little bit before that. Linda is a Thunder Mage, whereas Tinny is a normal mage. Normal mages have C rank Thunder at base, and it gets boosted to B through the Turtle Blood. Linda is a Thunder Mage. She has B rank Thunder, like, you know, Tiltu does, and then it gets boosted to A rank through the Turtle Blood as well, because the substitute has Holy Blood for some reason. And you got A rank, you know, Thunder, so you can use Thoron, have 20 might, and in conjunction with Wrath, that's a lot of damage. And she can like kill herself in the arena, get pretty low, and then just crit everything from there. It's pretty cool. Or just have her get hit by any enemy because her defenses are garbage, and it just crit everything with Wrath, and then level up through Paragon. It's so much fun. Unfortunately, she never gets a horse, unlike Amid, or unlike Arthur. Actually, Amid doesn't get a horse either. So she's always stuck with either 5 or 6 move. At least female war mages, I think that's what the class is called, like Mage Fight or something. The promoted version of her with like 6 move, at least it gets staves, so she can have like beast stabs, she can have like Physic, Restore, and that kind of utility. So it can still be kind of nice to have her. But generally the most fun is just using her skill. So yeah, destroy everything, but stay safe because she will die easily if you use it wrong. Then Faval, just like Jamka, is like, okay, we have a guy that kills 1 enemy per turn, and that's generally going to be it, because he's an archer with 6 move, and as strong as his weapon is, like, he gets the Holy Ichival. Is that what it's called? Ufel is what it's called now. The Ufel is pretty strong. 30 might is ridiculously strong. He gets like plus 10 strength as well, so he'll one-shot or two-shot most of the enemies and have pursuit, because the archer class has pursuit at base. So in all ways, he takes after Bridget, and if you give him like the Holden pairing, he has like a bunch of health growth, as well as a nice skill, which is good because his hit can be kind of poor sometimes. Ufel doesn't give him any hit bonus. Actually, it's like kind of 70 base hit, so enemies on terrain are kind of hard for him to hit. So having skill on him is actually like a useful stat. Almost no pairing can mess up Faval. Definitely recommend him over Aselo, because at least he just kills everything in one hit. Just don't be surprised to just see him like do like 1 thing per turn max, because he just doesn't have the movements or the range, or the close range really, to fight enemies on enemy phase. Then we have High Effort. These are units that I think are both kind of boring, or at least they are not very optimal, but you can still use them if you just enjoy their design or the character or something. Ratney and Rodoban, I can be very short about these. They're like less exciting versions of these. Like, their only drawback is being on foot. That's like one of their drawbacks, but then they're also just not super great at combat. They use swords, and it's like all the positive you can say about them. They do both have Pursuit, because the Sword Fighter class has Pursuit at base, but they don't have Astra. They also cannot inherit any skills or weapons for that matter, so they're just kind of boring versions of whatever is above them. But, you know, they're still sword fighters. If you're using them, but you somehow mess up the Ira pairing, you can use them, I guess. But I wouldn't highly recommend it. A mid is like Arthur, but without all the fun rewards. Seems like a theme with the substitutes sometimes. Instead of getting a horse, he just gets the mage fighter class, so that means swords and no horse. But hey, that class gets adept at least. But unfortunately, just like Feminam, he has adept at base, so that doesn't help either. Doesn't have pursuit, so yeah, rip. This guy is not very good. Has some like very niche uses. He can like, once he promotes, he has a Thunder, so you can use Thorn, I guess. But you'd rather, like, if you have a mid, you have Linda, you want to use Thorn with her. So I don't even really see the point in that. A mid is kind of boring. Not a big fan of a mid. Joe Helva is the brother of Johan. You can only recruit one of these boys. You can kind of tell by this what I recommend. He has a horse and he doesn't. That's kind of where it ends. Joe Helva has some advantages over him. Surprisingly enough, he's on foot. And he promotes to warrior, which can use bows. So sometimes in your arena you want to use bows instead of axes, either to just have a ranged weapon, so the enemy is forced to use like a javelin or a hand axe instead, or to make sure that you can one-shot a flyer, or just have more speed in general, because bows are much lighter than axes. Like the killer bow weighs like 3, whereas the hero axe weighs 12, so that can be nice, but those are all very small, and overall I would still say Jorhalva is a high effort unit. So he's down there. Tinny is what you get if you do pair Tiltu, and the problem with her is she's the same class as Linda, but none of the fun. Or like, she's the same promoted class as Linda, she's Mage Fighter as a promotion, which, as I said before, is not a very good class. It has swords and all like kind of tome ranks, but it just doesn't have like movements. That's the big thing. It has Adept though, which is kind of cool. Depending on the pairing, you might already have Adept. For, like if you paired Lewin with Tiltu, then you'll probably have Adept on her. Or you definitely have Adept on her, but she just doesn't get Forseti, so that kind of makes her not as good. Still kind of fun. You could put her in front on foot if you make the right pairing, but like her best pairing, like the best pairing for Tinny's sake is probably Azel with Tiltu, and that just kind of turns her into Azel for 2.0, which I've already indicated she's not very good. Then we have Aselo, who is like a boring version of Ufel spamming Faval, so you get a bow fighter with pursuit and 6 move, and no Ufel, just kind of strong. He does have like a secret convo. I don't even remember what it gives because it's not very good. It's not as good as like Dimnaz, for example. So that's kind of it's kind of okay. He has a cool design. He has a nice headband, but he's still an archer. Silverbow is still gonna like 2-shot some enemy types. He's a little fine in the arena. It's just, you can kill Draco Knights with him. That's kind of all there is to him, really. And finally, is Hannibal. I actually have considered putting Hannibal in good low investment just because there's like some things I use him for in chapter 9, but realistically there's just no way. But he does have like, you don't have to raise him like these two guys at least, like all these substitutes and stuff. He just joins battle ready. The thing is, the battle is ready for him like 5 miles away, and he has some trouble walking there because he's an armor knight with 5 move, or a general, I guess is his proper term. That does mean like when an enemy is like actually in front of him, you can actually 1v1 most stuff because he has Adept as well as Great Shield for some fun skills, and he has like really high attack and defense based on his high strength. He's got really high HP. I think it's like 60 base HP or something, which is insane. So the Great Shield is actually like effectively like a high chance of him to just dodge. Like he has more avoid than like the stats look like it. And he's just very nice. So if you can go through the trouble of recruiting him, which I know for new players is not easy, but it's a fun challenge, I think. So once you recruit him, you'll actually like, you'll be kind of annoyed because he loses like the 5 leadership stars he has as an enemy. But when you do have him, he's actually kind of fun to use in 1v1s. You can guard a castle somewhere and like just take no damage from enemies. As long as they're not magical, of course. Like it's low magical resistance. Just makes him go like, oh shit, I'm mage, I'm dead, bye. Or not in 1 round, but like obviously a couple. But yeah, use him in the arena. He can use all weapons basically, like swords, lances, bows, axes, and just experiment with him a little bit. I think he's fun to like screw around with, but I wouldn't recommend him, like, I wouldn't recommend moving him along with your main army. Like, this is not Shannon we're talking about, or this is not Sed we're talking about. He's actually not that good at fighting things and like killing them in 1 round because no pursuits. But you can use all kinds of brave weapons to make up for his lack of pursuit a little bit, and a high strength might actually make him like 2-shot things. So, you know, give him a go sometimes. He's not absolutely awful at fighting. It's just getting him there is kind of tough. And there you have it. Like 50 minutes later, we're done here. We have categorized all the FE4 units in 2 videos. So next thing I'm going to do is, I might remake the FE5 one, because one I made a while ago and only had 3 tiers. I think it could do a better job of distinguishing them. So I might go to that one next. And by the time that's done, I might be able to go to, what's it called? FE10 Part 4. and recommend like the in-game characters, because we're getting close to part 4 in the recordings, so that's probably what we're going to do next. Also might do Shadow Dragon at some point, a new mystery, like everything is going to be there at one point. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Peace around, and goodbye.